professional advice with a personal touch, consult Fuller Landau, Chartered Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
Coming up to 7:08 on CJAD. Welcome to today's Entrepreneur, a program about the entrepreneurial spirit that drives Quebec business. My name is Dan Delmar, along with Josh Miller, my co-host from Fuller Landau. How's it going, Josh?
Great, Dan.
So tonight, I'm very excited because we have someone who was, whose business was a part of my past anyway, Billy Waxman from Waxman Tuxedos. Welcome, Billy.
Good evening.
So I actually got my high school grad tux at Waxman's. Very fond memories.
There's got to be, most people in this town have had to have some formal wear, some men's tuxedo from Waxman somewhere along the way. They've been in business 84 years, since 1927. And quite a story it is, certainly with Billy here in the last 30 years. He's been involved pretty much since he was a kid, but certainly starting with his grandfather. So Billy, welcome to the show. Tell the listeners today, what does Waxman Formal Wear do today?
Well, basically, historically, we're recognized as a formal wear tuxedo shop, but at present time, we're getting more involved with ready-to-wear and made-to-measure tuxedos and shirting.
Now, that's what it is today, but this business started in 1927. So if you can take the listeners back a long way and kind of recount a little bit of the story about your grandfather and father before we get to the transition to you.
Well, naturally, my grandfather is the founder of Waxman's Formal Wear, and both himself and his wife were of Polish descent. My grandfather did his studying in Dresden, Germany as a ladies' dress designer. And in 1926, my grandmother came to Montreal and sent a ticket for my grandfather. And when he arrived in 1927, he worked for someone else for a couple of weeks and then realized that he wanted to be an owner-operator. And that's where it all started. We ended up at 4605 Park Avenue. The house was in the back and the little retail shop in the front. And we're still there today under the same address.
And your father, was he involved with his father, your grandfather, along the way as well before you came in?
My dad did his studies as well in ladies' dress design. But at age 14, I think he had a tendency to hang out on the streets a little too much. So my grandfather started him off in men's formal wear in a little shop right next door. And from age 14 well into his 20s, we were doing both menswear and ladies' wear. And my grandparents both passed away in 1960, 4 months apart, and my dad, being an only child, was left to run the business on his own. And my mom had just given birth to my sister and was pregnant with me in 1962. So from that point on, we dropped the ladies and continued only in men's.
So you think it was more from a time perspective, or really that was just the right focus for the business to take at the time?
I mean, there's no question. My mom was involved in the business with the ladies' gowns, and my dad had a knowledge in that field. But we just think that, back then, my dad being the only one involved, it just seemed the right thing to do, to just continue in the men's.
And, I mean, he had this business and he ran it. He took over from your grandfather. At some point, you came into the business. I mean, if your dad started at 14, I can only imagine when you kind of were there kind of fitting tuxedos or what have you at the store.
You know, my dad was always a workaholic. And, again, being an owner-operator, he basically worked, I call it a 10-day week. He was overworked. But he dragged me into the business at a very early age. Like from 12, 13 on, he was bringing me in on Sundays and at night, to just do a little extra work. So my instincts, kind of developed at a very early age. And I also came to terms with myself that I didn't like school that much. And I wasn't really an extraordinary student. I was an average 70%. And I went all the way up into university and did a year in political science. And then just realized it wasn't for me. So I went to the administration's office. It was very easy to sign out and went to work the next day.
So you don't regret your dad bringing you into the business as early as he did?
Having a family-run business, you're part of it from a very early age. And I was very fortunate in the sense that the fact that I wasn't a great student, and I don't know, I just felt instinctively that I should be in the business world. So having the business there for me, it was just a great opportunity to work.
Now, did you have any choices back then, or was really, hey, it's a family business, this is where we go on track?
I think any young entrepreneur, or any entrepreneur for that matter, definitely has a hidden talent. You have to try and find out, what direction you should take. But again, having a family-run business, right in front of you, I went into it, and I was very comfortable there.
So there was never any question of you straying from that family business?
Not really. I mean, when I was a little bit earlier, I worked in other retail stores, retail environments, but I just realized that I should, concentrate more on, devoting my time and energy with my dad.
And I guess the way later on, and Dan, when we listen to a lot of entrepreneurs and we talk about how they got into it, because not all of them started from scratch, a lot of them are transitioned from family business. In this case, Billy's third generation. Sometimes that individual doesn't always have the choice, and they feel that there's that obligation to get in, and it doesn't necessarily become their passion because, hey, this is what I have to do. This is my, the name on the door kind of thing. But I think in Billy's case, as we're going to continue to hear his story, he loves what he does, and he has passion for what he does, and he's gotten to really enjoy the environment around it from whenever he started 30 some odd years ago to certainly to today. And I'm really looking forward to hearing more about that.
So your parents never, told you they expected you to take on the business?
No, not at all. I mean, the fact that my dad, grabbed me by my ears at a very early age and dragged me in, I realized that, look, I enjoyed being by his side, earlier on. Naturally, as years progressed, there's always an issue with going into a family-run business. In my particular case, a father-son operation. I mean, it was a love-hate relationship. But I truly carry the family name proud. And listen, I mean, 84 years, same location. It's something to boast about.
Billy Waxman is our guest on today's Entrepreneur. More with him in just a moment. It's 7:15 on CJ80.
For professional advice with a personal touch, consult Fuller Landau, Chartered Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
Inspiring stories from outstanding business people. This is today's Entrepreneur on CJAD. Dan Delmar along with Josh Miller of Fuller Landau, and our guest this evening, Billy Waxman of Waxman Tuxedos.
We're talking about Billy's relationship with his father, and he came to the business in his late teens, maybe around 19. Billy, maybe you can talk to us a little bit how it was to work with your dad, the president of the company, to come in, how that kind of sharing of roles was in that small family business.
Well, look, there's no question I'm extremely grateful to my dad for everything he showed me. I mean, there's certain things you could learn from your dad, or at least in the workplace, that you just don't get in university. It's called street smarts. And my dad taught me a whole lot, a lot about respect and treating people as equals, and obviously instilling into me certain skills and requirements that were needed to to run the business, or at least be part of it. But there's no question. I mean, it was, like I said before, it was a love-hate relationship. I mean, fathers always want you to succeed and do better, and they tend to be hard on the ones they love the most.
Does that mean you didn't get along with them?
I mean, I did everything in my power to maintain proper composure with my old man, but he was definitely a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. I mean, I love him dearly, but he was a special kind of guy.
And were there, I mean, I know it was a small family business, and there were probably, everybody did a little bit of everything. Did you have clearly defined roles, or everybody was just in it?
Again, because it was a family-run business, and predominantly small business, we all shared in the functions. I mean, when I started, it was my dad and myself, and there are two gentlemen that are still with the company, one that's been with us for 45 years and the other one for 43 years. So, we all shared in the tasks.
And I guess with different generations come different ideas and different thoughts, and I would presume that you and your dad weren't always on the same page when it came to running the business. Were there certain changes that you either wanted to implement or implemented that kind of forced his hand or definitely forced a change in the business?
Yeah, there's a general rule with most human beings, especially in the workplace, that we tend to retaliate change. And I was one that never retaliated change. In fact, I always encouraged change and always changed for the better. But anything that I would bring up to my dad, he would never be in accordance with it. And if I felt right about it, I would just do it. And he would praise me to the rest of the world and just give me an extremely hard time. But overall, I think he was pleased with my changes.
Any specific one that stands out over time?
Renovations. Yeah, every time my dad would go out of town, there'd be a renovation taking place, and all his friends were aware of it. And it just had to be done when he was out of town because, again, he didn't like change. He was happy with the way it was. But whether it was breaking down walls or painting or moving the building from one side of the street to the other, so to speak, he didn't want to know from it.
Well, he's certainly in the same location for 84 years. There must have been some need to upkeep that the old building. I guess you learned a little bit along the way with maintenance and repairs and all that.
You know what? I have a tremendous amount of respect for the one famous Iona Monaghan, who was the fashion editor of the Gazette for many years. And when we celebrated 75 years in business, she referred to our store as the Waxman House. And I've carried that name along with us till now. I really consider it, a home where people can come and be in a very comfortable environment, and that everyone is very well received. And I think that's one of our secrets of success, is that make people feel at home when they come.
I guess as you want to focus on the customer, is there anything different you do in the store or that you I guess the customer feels more comfortable?
I think, well, the way we receive them, there's no question some people are a little bit intimidated by the presence of the store when they come in. But I guess our dress code of our staff and the way we receive them, we make them feel comfortable when they come in. They immediately realize that it's somewhat of a very unorthodox environment. Unlike most retail stores, which today have become more aggressive, and salesmen on the floor are a little bit more aggressive than in the past.
Billy Waxman is our guest of Waxman Tuxedos. This is Today's Entrepreneur on CJ80.
For professional advice with a personal touch, consult Fuller Landau, Chartered Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
7:25 on CJAD. Today's Entrepreneur, our guest this evening, Billy Waxman of Waxman Tuxedos. You've probably seen the Waxman House on Park Avenue near Mount Royal. Billy, do you need to market yourself after so many years? Do you market?
We definitely capitalize on the fact that we've been around for 84 years, and we have quite a strong name in the marketplace. So our name definitely works very, very well for us.
Do you find the name in and of itself as work, and do you rely more on word of mouth versus gimmicky type marketing?
Well, there's no question. We never really had the advertising budget, to be on different forms of media, whether it be radio, newspaper, or television. And I realized, early on in years that I was my best, form of media. I was like a walking billboard. So I definitely spent a lot of time on the streets, and whether it was interacting with concierges or bell captains or food and beverage banquet coordinators from hotels and all, and being involved in the film industry, just being out on the streets helped a great deal. And look, our website is fantastic. That works for us. I mean, we've obviously been working very hard at it for the last decade or so, and always updating. And people are very much impressed with our website. I'm a little bit difficult on myself. I want to bring our website to the next level, but right now it's an extraordinary form of media for us, and it's a great salesman on the road for when the store is closed.
So you haven't made the website interactive yet?
Not yet. I mean, I've already created a template to sell online, but that's a completely different infrastructure, and I just don't think the company's ready for that right now.
Now, being in business and being around for 84 years, have you ever had to kind of relaunch the name or re-solidify perhaps the name Waxman with any type of marketing event?
I mean, keep in mind, I've been involved, for 30 years, so I've always, had something on my plate, that I used to boost the company name. We renovated the store after 75 years in business, and it definitely helped a great deal. I mean, we received highest accolades for that, and won, Best Design Award for the City of Montreal, and along with that comes a tremendous amount of media. And, and then in 1998, we renovated the store, and that helped a great deal, preparing for the 2000 millennium.
I seem to recall a really big fashion show where Waxman was kind of front and center.
Yeah, I wanted to pay homage to my grandfather and kind of launch my first line of tuxedos, and also, celebrate 75 years in business. So I wasn't really recognized as a designer, so I went to Montreal Fashion Week, and I came up with this concept to bring on the top 16 Quebec designers of Quebec and have them create their interpretation of the tux, always respecting the criteria of the tuxedo. And, that fashion show was broadcasted live on the internet worldwide. Had 1,000 people at the show. And, we had Coeur Cheval Steakhouse, sponsoring the event. So it was an extraordinary experience, and it really put us on the map again. I mean, I'm always looking to re-solidify the foundation of the Waxman House.
And really, at this stage of the game, without doing anything too gimmicky, it's yourself, projecting yourself out there and being out in the marketplace.
I got to tell you, Josh, as far as I'm concerned, gimmicks don't work today. People are getting back to the basics. They don't want the big sales pitch. You got to provide personalized service, give the proper quality, and just maintain, an outstanding reputation.
Something that entrepreneurs, I know, and we've heard Dan in many, many shows, you got to stick to. Stick to the quality, stick to the service, stick to what you do best, and the word will get out.
More with Billy Waxman of Waxman Tuxedos in a moment. This is Today's Entrepreneur, presented by Fuller Landau on CJAD. It's coming up to 7:30 right now.
For professional advice with a personal touch, consult Fuller Landau, Chartered Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
7:33 on CJAD. This is Today's Entrepreneur, inspiring stories from outstanding business people. Dan Delmar, along with Josh Miller of Fuller Landau, and our guest this evening from Waxman Tuxedos, Billy Waxman. And Billy, we were talking about fashion a little bit before the news. Have you found it to be a challenge to continually stay modern and to stay on top of things, or do you find that the tuxedo has largely remained essentially the same over decades?
Well, every year there's new colors and styles that are introduced into the industry. We've seen purple tuxedos and brown tuxedos and olive green tuxedos. I tend to shy away from that. I practice what I preach. I maintain the traditional values of the traditional black tux. We look at James Bond, spanning over 5 decades, and I've always seen him with a black tux and a bow tie.
And that's a conscious decision. That's not something, you don't want to go with the fad. You're making that business decision, say, hey, we're keeping it simple. This is what's kept us going and in business for so many years. We're not really straying away from that.
Oh, absolutely. Traditionally, I think tuxedos should be, basic black. You always see different designers introducing tone-on-tone patterns and stripes, but I just maintain the traditional values of a classic black tux. There's no question over the years, lapels will, get a little bit larger or slim down, and top shoulders and width backs will change, but overall, in fashion today, anything goes. Just keep it simple and it's going to work.
Again, staying true to your product and true to the business model that you have going forward. Now, as we talk about transition, we talk about the grandfather and the father. Billy and his family was dealt a blow about 7 years ago when his father passed away. Billy, I'd like to hear a little bit on how you dealt with that at the time. A little bit from a personal sense, but certainly from a business sense, and how you continued.
Well, I'll tell you how I deal with death. First of all, I don't think my dad died. I think he retired and moved to Florida. Because consciously, he's with me every day, and I have a picture in my kitchen, in my so-called coffee shop, where he'll often talk to me, and he'll give me a little bit of trouble too when I'm doing something wrong. So consciously, he's around me at all times. The fact that I had to, take the seat of the president, and no longer, or work less on the front line and deal more with, the back end issues, from an administrative perspective. That's a big change.
You were in business with him for many, many years. I mean, probably 20 years or so before he passed away. So the business wasn't new to you, but yet you still had to take on this role. And certainly with the customers and the environment, there was no more, your father. It was now they're dealing directly with you.
I mean, I got an extraordinary education from my dad, working by his side, ever since I'm a teenager. So my instincts have been around, for a good 20, 30 years. Once my dad, retired, I kind of knew what had to get done. And there's no question I'm doing things a little bit differently now. I've restructured the financial platform, and we're obviously got to move with modern times and do things a little different than my dad did. I mean, it was, chaos with my dad. He was that typical businessman with an extremely messy desk, but he knew where everything was.
Now, you have siblings did you have to deal with or that got involved in the business?
The Waxman house was predominantly a man's environment, and I do have a sister who I love dearly, but she spent some time with us in the store. It was just very difficult. My dad was, somewhat of a very difficult man to work with, at least in the workplace. I mean, outside the store, he was a loving father and very caring, but he was quite abrasive at times, and very difficult to be with. I mean, if anything, I'm grateful because he strengthened me in many ways.
How does your managerial style differ from that of your father's, and do you find yourself falling into the same patterns as your dad did?
It's interesting you mention that because naturally we eventually become like our folks. I try to the best of my ability to recognize the positive and strong qualities that my dad had, and tried not to carry on his negative qualities, or at least in my eyes what was negative qualities. But I mean, I'm extremely grateful to my dad, and he's taught me so much about the business, and he was just a great leader for me.
How important, I mean, viewing him, I guess, as a mentor, how important was it to have any entrepreneur having a mentor kind of talk to you about business or whatever? And since his passing, have you been able to replace that mentor type role?
I mean, there's no question. I cope with issues a lot different than my dad. He had a lot more anxiety and more stress than I do, and I tend to be a little bit more footloose and fancy free with a lot of issues. And I have a different way of dealing with my team at work, but always maintaining the utmost respect, at least for my elderly crew, and just treating everybody as equals. And I don't really run my business from a boss's perspective. I kind of try and consider everybody my colleagues.
So you really get input. I mean, it's really a team atmosphere, a family business. You get everybody's input as opposed to a dictatorship, so shall I say?
Oh, there's no question. My dad was more of a control freak, where I, on the other hand, I have a very close and dear friend of mine. There were times over the years where I underestimated, my ability to, certain functions in the business. And he said that my strength was always that I surround myself with good people. So I always encourage people to, voice their opinion. And if they have something that's good and instinctively I know it's going to work, then I'll implement it into our system.
We're talking about a business that's been around 84 years, same location. Have you ever thought about expansion to different locations, Billy?
There was a formal wear establishment, that went bankrupt in the early 90s. And I was offered to, take over the business. And it could have been bought, for a very decent price. But it was too much of a big undertaking for me. I really like the simplicity of a family-run business. I operate under one location. We never had greed in our family. So, at times I could have opened up in Ottawa or, Laval or South Shore and done extremely well. But I also don't want to bastardize the family name. I like the fact that people come to my one location and living in Montreal, we're basically living in a town. So when we want to go to a destination store, the 10 kilometers or 20 kilometers is no bother for us.
Did you find it difficult over the years as people move out further, and especially Anglos moving further and further out to the suburbs? Was it difficult to retain your customer base?
again, the fact that we're a destination store, people don't need us on a daily basis. It's really just for that, we'll call it that wedding. It's not a big deal for them to travel to us. And, there has been competition along the years, but, people try elsewhere once and then they realize that, when it comes to personalized service and the quality and the reputation that we have, they just keep coming back. And we have a very loyal and faithful clientele.
Do you think, is there a next generation in this business? Your third generation.
Well,
and
listen,
you have kids.
I got 2 boys at home listening to the station, so I have a 14-year-old and a 16-year-old. I don't regret what my dad did, by dragging me in at a very early age. I'm going to try and do things a little different with my boys. I'd like them to, stay in school, as long as they want, or feel that, that they could, and maybe do some traveling. And I'd rather have the business there for them if they want to fall back on it, if they're not able to succeed in something else.
Is there, so you're really, you may have been given a choice going into this, but you certainly want your kids, the next generation, if you're looking at your own business and down the line and maybe passing it along, you want them to gain other experience or see what the world is out there before they really make the next step and possibly come into that business.
Yeah. One of my main objectives right now with the business is, we're known predominantly as a formal rental house, but, lately I've been obviously building up my ready-to-wear and my made-to-measure department and my shirt sales. We also have the template for a shop online concept. So if, in fact, both my boys do decide to come into the company, I'd like to try and avoid, the sibling rivalry that you have in a family-run business. And what I'd like to try and do is structure a work-type environment where there's, different divisions and they can each have their own strength. If one feels that he wants to work more in retail and the other one is more on the back end for, with administrative skills and to work on the computer, that's great. And then at the same time, try and split their workload a bit. Have one work like a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and the other one work a Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, and that gives them the opportunity to each have a weekend and alternate every second week.
Are they kind of inquisitive at this age about the business?
Well, listen, I'm living like Coco Chanel. I live upstairs in my penthouse, and my office is mid-floor, my atelier and retail is ground floor. My kids are very much involved in the sense that when they come home from school every day, they're involved in the hype of the store. So they're very much involved. Again, history has a way of repeating itself. I'm not as aggressive as my dad was with me at a young age, but again, instinctively, my kids are around. So they're in the work environment and they see what's going on.
And I guess that, transition has been kind of the theme of this show so far, Dan. So, Billy, as you look back and you look back at the different generations, and I almost know what the answer is going to be before asking, you look back and you say, have you, in looking at all the transition and the roles that each father-son played as they went along, do you think it could have been done any differently or any better?
Again, I don't regret the way my dad brought me into the business and the education I got from him. I'm extremely grateful, for everything he did, and there was reason behind his madness, with the way he brought me up. Ultimately, what he taught me, which will remain with me, and I definitely pass down to my generation, is you got to have the ultimate respect for people around you, and actually for your customers, and gratitude, and just treat everyone as equals. It's very important.
Billy Waxman of Waxman Tuxedos, our guest on today's Entrepreneur. More in a moment. It's 7:45 on CJAD.
For professional advice with a personal touch, consult Fuller Landau, Chartered Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
7:48 on CJAD. Today's Entrepreneur, a program about the entrepreneurial spirit that drives Quebec business. Our guests this evening, Billy Waxman of Waxman Tuxedos, and we welcome back Nick Moredas, tax partner at Fuller Landau. Welcome back, Nick.
Evening.
Now, every week, Dan, we're talking about entrepreneurs. We're talking about their incorporated business. And I guess with being April 4th and tax season here, there are a number of entrepreneurs that don't incorporate and run their own businesses and report on their personal tax returns, and some self-employed people. And I'm sure there's a body or two in this room that might be that way.
Maybe.
So, Nick, perhaps you can guide these types of self-employed people, these types of entrepreneurs in the, I guess, minefield of deductions.
Well, becomes very important because if you are spending money to earn income, you're allowed to deduct it off your income and pay less tax. And if you forget or if you don't keep proper receipts and you don't bother claiming this deduction, you're not going to get a call or a letter from your government saying, we believe you missed some deductions and we'll add them on for you and give you back some money. So this is something you got to do for yourself, and it pays to do it for yourself. And in terms of the deductions that you've got, it's not only the self-employed who have a bigger amount of deductions that you can claim, but it also goes to commissioned employees and even employees as well who have these rights within certain, but very limited. There's a lot of limitations.
And it could also be registered businesses that are unincorporated.
Absolutely. If you're Bob, registered, and you're a plumber, say, and you don't have to be an incorporated entity, it's the same notion. I'm billing clients. There's my revenue, but I have expenses. I have gas for my truck. I have my truck. I have maintenance for my truck. I got my tools, the consumables I use while doing my work. All these things are expenses that we are allowed to turn around and deduct. And if you had to go on a formal event and you needed to rent a tux from Billy here, and because it was for your business and you're representing your business there, that too would be a deductible expense. So that's the stuff that we have to look at. I'm just going to mention something really quick for employees because this is something I think as well for especially commissioned salesmen that they can do these deductions. Your employer should be looking to give you a form though. And the form federally, if you like numbers, is a T2200. And in Quebec, it's called a TP 64.3. And what these forms are telling the government is your employer is saying that my employee, is supposed to use his car for work or purchase supplies for work or use his home office for work. And without that form that basically says, this is what you have to do, Mr. Employee, you can now claim expenses that are, again, a lot more limited than the entrepreneur. But then go ahead and do that. And what can you claim? And this is now applies for the employee, the commissioned agent, or the unincorporated entrepreneur. Well, of course, you need accountants, so there are fees to charge you to do all this bookkeeping and be able to prepare your tax returns. That is a deductible expense. You're advertising, you're doing promotion, whether you're a commissioned agent or whether you're self-employed, that becomes a deductible expense. Your car. In many instances, and usually the fast, quick rule of thumb is I have a car, I use it from January to December, I drive 30,000 kilometers a year, and if you can identify that 17,000 of the 30,000 kilometers for the year, I'm using it for work, I'm going to see clients, I'm driving around to see my suppliers, etc. Well, then 17,000 over 30,000, I guess proportionally, of all the expenses related to the car is a deduction for work.
Now, then there's the abuse, right? I mean, you have people that sometimes push the limit a little bit. So do you suggest that people, really be reasonable and do what's actual? They shouldn't maybe rent tuxedos to go to work every day for 200 days. They should maybe steer away from renting the Ferrari for the year. I mean, are there cases of abuse that the government kind of cracks down on?
Absolutely. Actually, in the law, to be able to deduct anything, an expense has to be reasonable in the circumstances. So if I do decide to rent a tux and that's going to be my uniform every day, is it reasonable for me to be like that? And the answer may be not, although Billy...
Well, it's reasonable for me, of course.
Of course, it's excellent for you. But that is the case. If I have a car with 30,000 kilometers and I'm going to deduct 28,000 of the 30,000 for work, but I live in Terrebonne and my office is in Ville Saint-Laurent, well, that doesn't make sense either because I got to get to work somehow, and especially for employees, because driving to work is not a deduction.
Can I deduct my coffee? Because if I don't have caffeine inside of me for Del Mar at night, I'm really not entertaining at all.
You can, yes.
But otherwise, he is entertaining? Yes, absolutely.
Yes, he is.
Thanks, guys. Today's Entrepreneur on CJAD. 7:56 on CJAD. Today's Entrepreneur, our guests, Billy Waxman of Waxman Tuxedos and Nick Moretus, tax partner at Fuller Landau. And we're talking about deductions. I want to ask a question to Nick, just as someone who's self-employed. The issue often comes up about home space. Can you deduct part of your living expenses? How much can you deduct? And also, can you go after stuff like, cable, internet, telephone?
Okay. Who am I billing? No. The home office expenses are actually under the microscope because the governments are looking at that. And one thing we are finding is, and this is a lot of it is anecdotal, is that those who have a place to work, like such as you here, and are using your home sort of as a second office, etc., may have some difficulty doing the write-off. We've seen it, example with some professionals, doctors, etc., who have available offices in the hospital and also use for research and additional work at home, that they're basically being denied that deduction. For most self-employed, where there isn't an office that they generally go to, then yes, you do. And you're basically looking to say, how much of my space in my home am I using over my total space available in my home? So if I've got one room 10 by 10 and my home is 1,500 square feet and this is 100, well, that percentage of the expenses of the house I'm allowed to deduct as my cost of maintaining that office.
So basically what you're saying is be reasonable, don't be greedy,
always.
And let it be justified.
That's right.
Thanks very much, Nick.
Thank you.
As we approach the end of the show, got to ask Billy, what one piece or two pieces of advice would you give to today's entrepreneur?
Josh, you asked me earlier, what are we doing different in business today, to get our fair market share? And I got to say, easily over the last, 3 to 4 decades, if there's one thing we've always maintained is give the personalized service and quality. And I think today in retail, everyone's looking, for a shortcut and, not providing the personalized service and trying to make the fast buck. And the more other retailers don't provide the personalized service and the quality, it just makes us shine even more. So if I had any one piece of advice for any young entrepreneur, be true to yourself and really personalized service and quality, whether you're providing a commodity or a service, it's very important.
Thank you, Billy. Certainly, as you transition through 3 generations, possibly to the next one, staying true to yourself is hugely important.
Thank you, Josh Miller of Fuller Landau, and Nick Moratis as well, and Billy Waxman of Waxman Tuxedos. Today's Entrepreneur returns next week, next Monday night at 7 p.m. You can reach Fuller Landau during business hours at 514-875-2865 or visit their website, www.flmontreal.com. Delmar at Night is next on CJAD.